Hello and welcome to Tech for Non-Techies, the only podcast that demystifies the fast-growing technology sector. I'm your host, Sophia Matveeva, Chicago Brief MBA and tech entrepreneur. My aim here is to give you the skills, knowledge and confidence to find opportunities in the tech sector, whether that's through founding a company, getting a dream job, or bringing a fresh perspective to your work. Hello, smart people. How are you today? I am excited. Today, cafes and restaurants open in France, which means I get to go back to my favorite cafe by the marina, watch the sunset over the yacht, and drink rosé. I love French cafe culture, and a big part of it is people watching. If you've ever been to a French cafe, you will know that seats at the tables are next to each other rather than opposite each other like they are in the US and in the UK. This means that you and your companion are watching the parade of people on the streets rather than looking at each other. And this inevitably means that people get dressed up and look good, and that's very nice. Eye candy is a very good thing in my book. So I'm welcoming the return of rosé and French chic this week. But before I go to drink wine and look at sexy people, I want to teach you about an important concept in the product development process, and that is prototyping. This is a useful concept for anybody who wants to make products or invest in them, and I will show you why. I used my first prototype to raise money for my first company, which is actually fairly standard. Essentially, you make a model for your idea and then you show it to people. And then you say, if you invest, you'll be making an investment into turning this prototype into code. So essentially, you will be making an investment to turn this prototype into something that is a living product. My student Lucia did even better. She raised money to make a prototype. So that's a stage earlier. She literally learned about the prototyping process in my course. She worked out what assumptions she wanted the prototype to test. She figured out how much it would cost to make, and then she raised that amount from angel investors. So, innovators, investors, listen up. The prototyping process is the first step in the product development journey. So you need to know about it. I'm going to mention quite a few resources in this episode. And if you want to get a summary of the resources and the questions that I mentioned in the episode, then go to techfornontechies.co/design1 and put in your email address. The reason why I'm telling you about this is I don't want you to be panicked when you listen and keep on stopping the episode so you can make notes. You can literally get the notes if you just go to this link. On this podcast, I've talked to you about the digital production process, which is circular. This is a foundational concept, and if you don't know it yet, then go back to episode 3 called The Most Important Thing About Tech. For the purposes of today, what you need to know is that when you have an idea for an app or a site or an algorithm, the first step should not be writing code or hiring developers. Instead, you need to get into the design process. We've had lots of episodes on user experience design here, and if you haven't listened to any, the best ones are episode 8, called Intro to User Experience Design with Sang Volt, the Design Standards Board member at the General Assembly, and episode 18, Introduction to Design for Technology with Jane Austen, who is the Director of Design at Flo Health. So I've mentioned prototypes, but I think some of you might not even know what a prototype is, and that is totally fine. I didn't know what a prototype was when I founded my first tech company, and I did not know what an important role it would play in my company's life. And this is normal for non-technical founders. You don't know what you don't know, but this is why I'm here. So before we continue, let me tell you what a prototype actually is. A prototype is a thing you can see and use, but you do not have to write code to make it. A prototype for a digital product has screens that look and feel like an app or a site, but it serves as an illustration of what the product could be. Because it does not contain code, it does not store data. So the interaction that the prototype would be able to give you is very, very limited. The aim of this thing, the aim of the prototype, is to show what your idea could look like and what it could work like, so you could get feedback from target users. So there is a leap of imagination that is required, but it's a much smaller leap than when you're just using words to describe what thing you're going to make. A prototype of an app or a site is just a few static screens stitched together using design software. Frankly, it's literally just a bit more sophisticated than a PowerPoint. You can also make a prototype for an algorithm, so this also applies to companies that then go on to make AI. So you can make a prototype for an algorithm using a basic spreadsheet. And J.S. Kung, the founder of Aizen, who we spoke to earlier, did exactly that. In both cases, the aim is to get your idea into a very simple, cheap product and test it with target users. So, for example, a prototype for the early version of Tinder would have had a screen to show login and then a couple of screens to show a couple of dating profiles. And then there will be a screen that shows you that you got a match and invites you to chat. The designers would have taken this prototype and tested it with their target audience before committing the designs to code. So what I want you to understand right now from what I've said is that having a tested prototype is essential before you speak to developers. But today we're actually not going to talk about how to make a prototype. And this is not just because I want to be annoying. I actually want it to be useful. So we're not going to talk about how to make a prototype because design does not start with drawings. It starts with research. So in order for you to have a good prototype, you need to do research. And I want to separate these two parts of the design process into 2 episodes for 2 reasons. It's all very symmetrical around here. One reason is to make sure that you have time to listen and absorb the learning. And another reason is to illustrate the point. Many product makers are so keen to see a thing that they can hold that they skip the research stage. But if you miss this stage and you just start making, the thing you're going to make is not going to be very good. So the research stage is crucial. And the more you understand the problem that you're solving and whom you're solving it for, the better off you will be. So don't think of this as boring. The research phase is an investment in the future of your product. And that is super cool. And remember, when we talk about product, what do we mean? A product is always a solution to a problem that somebody is experiencing. So users are always focused on their problem, and therefore you have to be focused on their problem because you are creating a solution for that problem. So a product is always a solution for a problem. So the better you understand the problem, the better you understand the users, the better your product will be, which is why understanding the problem is a key part of the design process. For the investor listeners, you want to invest in founders who have devoted time to understanding the problem. Don't torture founders. You don't need them to write you a book of research, but you do need to see that the pitch you are seeing isn't just based on their own experience. Because if they're solving a problem for just one person, and that person happens to be them, it's not going to be a very scalable business. Jane Austen, whom I mentioned earlier, says design is not just about how to build a solution, but whether a problem needs solving in the first place. Before working on prototypes and wireframes, find a market need. And this, my dear Smarties, is the design process. And there are 4 stages of the design process. The UK Design Council has developed a useful visual aid to explain this process, and if you get the notes, you will get a link to this visual aid. Essentially, this visual aid is called a double diamond, which describes the 4 stages of the design process. The 4 stages of the design process are: 1. Discover. 2. Define. 3. Develop. And 4. Deliver. So that's discover, define, develop, and deliver. And today we are dealing with the first 2. That's discover and define. The first stage, discover, is about understanding rather than simply assuming what the problem is. It involves speaking to and spending time with people who are affected by the problem you are solving. After you've done the discovery, you need to define. You need to collect those insights and analyze them and understand what insights you have gathered, and that will help you to define the challenge in a different way. Only after that can you actually start making a thing. Next week, we will talk about the develop and deliver process. At this point, I want you to know that it's perfectly possible that the discovery stage will tell you that the problem you're investigating isn't really worth solving. And that's disheartening, but it's better that you find out early rather than you find out when you've basically invested money into coding and getting users, and then you find out that actually nobody wants this thing, because in relative terms, that's fairly expensive. So if nobody has this problem that you think is a problem, it's better to find out early before you have spent a lot of time and money on it. For the research phase, for the nerds and introverts among you, I want you to know that desk research is not enough. So beware of relying too much on data and on market surveys. If you think you can just read Nielsen or the McKinsey Quarterly and get all of your research from there, then sorry, you're wrong. You have to become an anthropologist, which is quite fun actually. Observe people doing stuff in real life. And honestly, this is quite fun when you get into it. People are really weird, and observing human weirdness is fun. So we're back to the joys of people watching, which I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. You have to go out and see how people solve a particular problem now. Watch people in a natural environment and then speak to them. When I was working on my first product, which is an app where women got stylist feedback by sending them outfit photos with questions like, shall I wear this on a date? Shall I buy this? Is this handbag really worth $500? When I was doing the research stage for this, I would literally go to shops and see how women behaved. I would lurk in stores and watch women as they picked out clothes. I would try to overhear their conversations with sales assistants, and I watched to see if they took photos as they shopped. Frankly, I'm surprised I did not get arrested. I did get some very funny looks though. As well as observing people, you also have to talk to them. So ask your introvert side to stay home and then go and get involved with actual humans. Ask them about the problem you are solving. Do they also experience the same problem? How are they solving it? There's a UX designer whose work I really like called Sarah Doody, the founder of UX Portfolio. She has a useful Twitter account for those of you on Twitter, and again, that's going to be included in the notes email. Sarah says, data and analytics can only tell you the what, but research and talking to people allows you to dig deep and understand the why behind their behavior. Without talking to users, you risk the expensive mistake of creating something they don't want. So to sum up, in the research phase, do some desk research, then go out and observe people, and then speak to them. These are your tasks. And I have 5 questions that I want to leave you with. In the discovery stage of the process, keep on asking yourself, who is our user? What is the user's motivation or goal? Am I assuming something about the user? And the answer, by the way, here is usually yes. You just need to figure out what that is. How can I test this assumption? Am I thinking of the user's needs or my own? By asking these questions, even when you have a successful product out, you will be able to iterate in the right direction because you're constantly iterating. If you're making products in a startup or in a large company, you literally need to tattoo these questions into your brain. Having this user focus will never stop serving you. Next week, we're going to talk about the next stage of the prototyping process. Once you gathered all of this insight, you will then have to test some assumptions. And to test those assumptions, you will work on making a prototype. That's what we're going to cover next week. As I mentioned, I have covered a lot in this episode, and I know it can be hard to remember everything unless you're literally sitting there and taking notes or just stopping the episode all the time and making notes, which is difficult. So if you want to get the summary points, including the links to the resources I've mentioned and the 5 key questions, just go to techfornontecchies.co/design1. Then put in your email address and I will send you an email with all of this good stuff. That's techfornontecchies.co/design1, and the link to this is also in the show notes. Finally, smart people, if you found this episode useful, I would love it if you could leave a rating and review. It really does help me spread this free educational content to more people, which means that more smart people like you get to benefit from it. And that makes the world a better place. So get some good karma and leave a rating and a review for this podcast. And for the people who have already left ratings and reviews, thank you. I love you. I just saw that the podcast got another 5-star rating, and I don't know who it's from because I don't get that information, but I know that you are listening. And I want you to know that I am really grateful. Your support really does make a difference. And it also makes me feel warm and fuzzy. If this kind of learning content floats your boat and you want more, then come and join me as a member of Tech for Non-Techies. Our membership is your best friend as you navigate the world of tech. Every week, we have live sessions and masterclasses. You also get monthly member meetups, Q&A with me, and learning notes on key aspects of technology like AI and product management and the app economy. So what's not to like? Nothing, I tell you. So check us out at techfornontecchies.co/membership, and the link to that is also in the show notes. That's it for now, my dear smarties. I will speak to you next week. In the meantime, enjoy yourselves. Ciao.